never liked diamonds. Not because they weren't beautiful. They were. Cold, glittering, eternal. But I'd learned, somewhere between my mother's passive-aggressive sighs and my father's long silences, that diamonds came with debts and secrets. I was sitting at the end of the table, the short end as my sister Madison used to joke, when she pulled out her hand and let the light catch on the enormous solitaire on her finger. Gasps filled the room like a staged production. My mom clutched her chest like she'd just watched a Nicholas Sparks proposal scene. My dad cleared his throat with a pride I hadn't seen since he opened his first chain of hardware stores. "Oh, my God, Maddie," my cousin squealed. "That thing is huge." It was. It sat on her like a crown she hadn't earned. The table became noise. Clinking glasses, congratulatory kisses, jokes about setting the date. I sat frozen, barely blinking, because I knew that ring. It wasn't just any ring. It was my ring. Or at least bought with my money. I had spent 4 summers working in that suffocating hardware warehouse. Lifting, hauling, stacking. Every dollar I didn't spend went into a college trust that my grandfather set up for me before he died. My parents had managed the account until I turned 21. I never saw a dime. When I asked, they said it was being invested. When I pressed, I was told to be grateful for the roof over my head, for the car they let me borrow, for the food in the fridge. They said things were tight, and the money was locked up for later. I stopped asking, until now. Now it sparkled, on her left hand. Later that night, I waited for the kitchen to empty. The dishwasher hummed low, masking my footsteps. "Hey, sweetheart." Dad was leaning against the counter, picking at leftover cake crumbs. "Big night, huh?" I swallowed the knot rising in my throat. "Where'd the ring come from?" He gave me a slow, amused look. "You mean, where did Jake buy it?" "No. I mean, how?" He raised a brow, only slightly annoyed. "What's that supposed to mean?" "I recognize that diamond. I know that cut. I picked it out when I was 16. Mom took me ring shopping, remember? Said it was for someday. That was part of the fun Grandpa left me." Silence. I waited. "Ellie, come on," he finally muttered, brushing his hands clean. "That was years ago. And it's not like you were going to use it anytime soon." My ears rang. "So you gave it to her?" "She's getting married," he snapped, as if that made everything logical. "She needed a start. You're not even dating. What would you do with a ring sitting in a vault somewhere?" My voice cracked. "It wasn't yours to give." He straightened up, voice hard. "Don't start this again. We raised you. We paid your bills. You're not entitled to everything, just because your grandfather left something behind. Family helps family." I stared at him, a lump of rage sitting in my chest like broken glass. Family helps family. Funny how that only applied when Madison needed something. It got worse. 3 days later, Madison showed up to my apartment, all bubbly excitement and wedding. "Pinterest boards. You're going to love the color scheme," she beamed. "Mauve and sage. Very ethereal, very Bridgerton meets boho." I stood in the doorway, still in my work clothes. My hands smelled like paint thinner. I hadn't even taken off my apron. She barely noticed. "I want you to be my maid of honor," she blurted, fishing a tiny box from her purse. Inside was a delicate bracelet, the same kind she bought for her college roommates when they pledged that fake sorority. "I figured since you're not really doing anything huge with your life, right now you'd be free to help out more. I blinked. Sorry. She smiled, too pleased with herself to hear the ice in my voice. I mean, you're not in grad school or anything, and Jake's sister is so busy with med school, I thought. Why not Ellie? You always plan things so well. Remember that time? You threw me that breakup brunch? You mean the one where I paid for everything and you got drunk and called me boring? She waved it off like I was joking. Come on. You're good at this stuff. You've got the time, and besides, she held up her hand again, letting the ring catch the sunlight like some sort of divine joke. It's family now. I didn't take the bracelet. I didn't say yes. I didn't say no either. I just closed the door slowly, walked to the bathroom and locked it behind me. Then I sat on the floor and cried until my ribs hurt. I spent the next few weeks saying little and watching everything. While Madison paraded venues, flower samples, and designer gowns, I quietly requested old bank statements. I found the name of the trust. I emailed the attorney who'd handled Grandpa's will. I smiled through wedding group chats and pinned bridesmaid hairstyle inspo to keep appearances. Behind the scenes, I traced every penny, and what I found wasn't just betrayal. It was theft. They didn't just borrow my trust. They drained it, $38,742.62, down to the cent, over the course of 2 years. Wedding expenses, jewelry store transfers, payments to a family account that Madison used for premarital counseling and wedding yoga retreats. My stomach turned, and that's when I knew. They wanted me to be part of the wedding. I'd be there, but not the way they expected. I didn't sleep that night. I just stared at my ceiling fan, listening to it rattle like it might come unhinged and crash down on me. Maybe that would be simpler. But then I thought about the emails, the documents, the way my name had been stripped from every line item like it never mattered. I wasn't going to beg for space in a life I built for them. I was going to take it back. The next morning, I went to the jewelry store. Not just any store. The same boutique downtown where my grandfather once took me after my high school graduation. The same one where I picked out the stone, told him I loved emerald cuts. Where I told him I didn't want something flashy, just something meaningful. Back then, I thought it would be saved for someone who loved me. Now, it was sitting on Madison's left hand like a trophy. Miss Ellison? The man behind the counter blinked at me when I walked in. Ellie Ellison? It's been years. I gave a tired smile. You remember me? Of course. Your grandfather was a gentleman. He paused, glancing over my shoulder as if expecting him to appear. I was sorry to hear. Thanks. I pulled out my folder. I need your help, confidentially. I left the shop with a printed appraisal and a signed statement verifying the transaction, paid in full from the Ellison Family Trust. My name on the file. My name on the authorization, and a small handwritten note from the manager. Still registered under your file. No changes ever requested. They didn't even bother hiding the trail. I folded the documents carefully and placed them back into the my envelope. I wasn't sure where they'd come into play yet, but I knew they'd be powerful. Not today, but soon. That night, back at my apartment, I dug out the notebook I hadn't used since college. On the front, a coffee stain and a sticker that said, "Build your own story." Fitting, I opened it to a blank page and wrote, "Wedding Day, Silent War," plant then underlined it 3 times. Then I began writing. The wedding countdown reached 21 days, 3 weeks. I watched from a careful distance as Madison spun into her whirlwind of self-worship. Her Instagram became a curated cathedral of ring selfies, wine tastings, and flat lays of customized bride, vibes-only gift boxes. She hadn't messaged me in days, except to send a PDF of my updated Maid of Honor duties, like I was staff, not family. I replied with a thumbs-up emoji. She didn't notice I hadn't RSVP'd. Meanwhile, I was busy building my version of an RSVP, not a polite return card, not a +1 confirmation, but a list. A blueprint. A strategy. Every piece of proof, the trust statement, the jeweler's receipts, the wedding invoices with my name retroactively removed, went into a slim black folder. One I kept taped behind the kitchen drawer. The only person who knew was Tessa, and she'd become more than just a tool in this plan. She became witness. Every time we met in secret cafes or parking lots far from town, she'd hand me another piece of gold. Screenshots of Jake's private messages from when they briefly reconnected last year. Venmo transactions labeled PLS Don't Tell Maddie. A voice memo Jake sent her at 2 a.m., whining about how Ellie's got that trust fund. She doesn't need it. I'm just trying to give Maddie a good life. I added it all to the folder. Every lie, every entitlement, every smug assumption. They wanted a perfect wedding. I'd give them truth instead. The bridesmaids. Brunch too. Weeks before the wedding, Madison invited all her bridesmaids to a brunch at Mom and Dad's house. The theme was rustic garden romance, which really meant cheap plastic vines and heart-shaped pancakes. "You're late," Madison said when I walked in, her voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "Traffic," I said. Also, I wasn't invited until 11. It's 10:58. She rolled her eyes like that made me petty. I smiled like it made me powerful. There were 6 girls in total, all perfectly curated. Influencer types, high heels on grass, lipstick on mimosas, girls who would post a dozen filtered group selfies before realizing no one had eaten. I didn't say much. I just watched. Madison was performing for them, reliving her how we got engaged story, dramatically retelling how Jake had custom designed the ring. I wanted to laugh. I wanted to scream. But mostly, I just observed how easy it was for her to turn my money into her mythology. "Oh my God," one girl gushed. "You're so lucky. Jake's obsessed with you." I swallowed the bile rising in my throat. Madison winked. "He is. He actually told me he always knew he'd marry me." I saw Tessa's text flash on my lock screen. "Just sent you something. Open it when you're alone." I excused myself to the upstairs bathroom, locked the door, and pulled out my phone. The audio file was short. Only 26 seconds. Jake's voice slurred. "Madison's a nightmare, man. Like, she's hot, okay. But Ellie? Ellie understands things, like, if I'd met her first, maybe..." I stopped breathing. I replayed it. Twice. I didn't feel flattered. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt something else. Something quiet and sharp and surgical. Leverage. I sent a simple reply to Tessa. "Thank you. This changes everything." That night back in my apartment, I sat with the folder open in front of me. I slipped the new audio file into a USB drive and placed it in an envelope. Wrote one word across the front in red ink. Doubt. Then I wrote 6 more envelopes, each with a single word: theft, truth, lies, choice, history, consequences. Inside each, I placed a piece of the puzzle. Bank statements, voice memos, screenshots, photos. Then I printed the guest list Madison sent me last month, the same one she assumed I wouldn't care about, and began circling names, not random ones, intentional ones. Jake's boss, her old high school nemesis, my grandfather's former business partner, and a journalist I knew from college who now ran a wedding column for the local paper. I slipped each envelope into a labeled folder. My plan wasn't to ruin the wedding, it was to unmask it. The wedding was now 13 days away. The venue had been finalized. The dress was altered to perfection. The color-coded seating chart was laminated and ready. Everything, to Madison's eyes, looked seamless. But beneath the surface, things were already starting to rot. Because the envelopes had been delivered. It started with a phone call. Not to me, to Madison. I only knew because she texted me in a panic while I was at work. Madison. Did you send something to Aunt Joan? She's asking weird questions about the trust. Why is she saying I misused funds? I stared at the message, my heart beating fast but steady. I didn't reply. Let her sit in that confusion. Let it bloom. That evening, I walked into my parents' house under the excuse of finalizing my dress hem. Mom was in the kitchen, face tight. Dad stood by the dining room pacing. They looked up when they saw me, eyes full of expectation, but not warmth. Ellie, Mom said quickly, what is going on? I blinked. What do you mean? She lowered her voice. We got a call from your grandfather's lawyer. Oh? Dad stepped in, sharper. You sent something to him, to others. You're spreading lies, about the trust, about Madison. I tilted my head. I haven't said a word. You sent documents. Then I didn't say anything, I said softly. The documents did. His face turned red. Mom's hands trembled slightly. You're ruining your sister's wedding. Why would you do this to her? To her? I opened my mouth, and then closed it again. No, not yet. I still had cards to play. I haven't done anything, I said coolly. If there's confusion, maybe it's because things were done behind my back. Maybe people are just finding out. You're going to break this family, Dad snapped. I smiled, the first real smile I'd felt in weeks. Then maybe you should have thought twice before selling me out for a piece of jewelry, the bachelor party. The next ripple hit 2 days later. Tessa texted me from a downtown bar around 1:30 a.m. Tessa. Guess who I just saw Jake with? No, not Madison. She sent a photo. Jake, 2 girls, way too close. One sitting practically in his lap. Another photo followed. Him whispering in one girl's ear, his hand around her waist. I replied only, time-stamped? She sent me a screen recording of the live time capture. She was learning fast. I saved the video to the same USB drive. Then I emailed myself a backup. Then, for the first time since this all began, I allowed myself to laugh. Not because I was happy, but because it was all so predictable. The rehearsal dinner invite. A gold-trimmed envelope arrived in my mailbox 3 days later, a formal invitation to the rehearsal dinner. Held at the same country club Madison said I could probably never afford. The RSVP was pre-filled. Attendance confirmed. They never even gave me the chance to decline. I stared at the envelope for a long time, then tore it in half. The next morning, I walked into a small print shop and ordered 20 copies of something far more interesting. A clean, discreet trifold, pamphlet titled The Price of a Ring, What Was Taken and Who Paid for It. Simple black text. No names on the cover, but enough inside to draw gasps. Each one contained a side-by-side comparison. The original trust documents, the jewelry store receipt, the screenshots, the voice memo transcript. I didn't need to scream. I just needed truth in print. 2 days to go on the day before the wedding rehearsal, my phone rang. It was a private number. I answered. A woman cleared her throat. Hi, is this Ellie? Yes. This is Maureen. I'm the event coordinator at Ridgeway Vineyard where the wedding is scheduled. I just wanted to clarify something. Sure, she hesitated. We received some material from a few different sources about the ring and the financing and a voice recording? I stayed silent. Maureen continued, gentler now. We're not canceling anything, but there's been concern from some of the wedding guests. I think Madison and her fiancé are handling, but I thought you should know, there's some tension building. Tension? I echoed. Yes, and Ellie. She paused. If there's any truth to what's in that file, I hope you're okay. No one had asked me that before. Not once. Thanks, I said, then hung up. I stood alone in my living room, surrounded by silence, and a folder full of proof. They had taken my money, but I had taken the narrative, and now everyone was watching. The vineyard looked like something from a bridal magazine. Rows of sun-soaked grapes, cream-draped pergolas, and waitstaff in suspenders setting down flutes of pre-ceremony champagne. The whole thing felt expensive, which made sense. I had paid for it. I arrived at the rehearsal in a muted navy dress. No florals, no lace, no soft pastels to blend in. Madison wanted her bridesmaids to coordinate in sage green and blush. I wore defiance. Jake gave me a brief, wary glance when I walked, and then quickly looked away. He was sweating, not from the heat, but from fear and guilt. Tessa had told me she'd mailed the rehearsal pamphlets the night before. Every guest who mattered would have had time to read, digest, and begin whispering, even if they didn't. Believe it, they'd remember it, and they'd look at Jake a little differently. They'd look at all of them differently. Madison descended the vineyard steps like a queen returning to her kingdom. Hair freshly curled, fake laugh bubbling on. Command, but she couldn't fake her eyes. They darted around the venue, scanning, searching, waiting for something to collapse. She walked over, feigning nonchalance. Ellie, you're here. Your RSVP said I was confirmed. Right, she said stiffly, adjusting the hem of her dress, even though it didn't need adjusting. Just glad you could make it. Her friends gathered nearby like handmaidens, all clearly briefed to say nothing. Their smiles were thinner today, tighter, the kind that stretch just enough to say we know, but we're pretending we don't. Ready? To rehearse your big day? I asked, just loud enough for a few people nearby to hear. She nodded with a smile that didn't touch her face, but her voice dropped. You need to stop. Stop what? Madison's jaw twitched. Whatever you're doing, spreading lies, trying to ruin this. I stepped closer, slowly. You stole from me. It wasn't your money. It was for the family. Then maybe the family should have asked. A pause. She didn't argue, because she couldn't. The cracks widen. During the walkthrough, Madison forgot her lines twice. The officiant glanced at his note cards awkwardly, while she stumbled over honor and cherish. Jake looked increasingly pale. At dinner afterward, the room was dimly lit, candles flickering over long wooden tables. It should have felt romantic. It felt like a wake. The wine flowed, and so did the tension. At one point, Jake's cousin loudly asked, "So, is it true the ring's a family heirloom? Or did someone else in the family sponsor it?" You could hear a fork hit a plate. Madison laughed, too loud, too fake. "It's sentimental." I watched her hands tremble slightly as she reached for her drink. Someone else asked if the bridesmaids were all wearing custom shoes. Who's footing the bill? Still the parents, or... Jake's father cleared his throat. Let's not get into finances tonight. But it was already there, simmering in every glance, every pause. They were trying to keep the house standing, but the foundation was cracking, and I wasn't lifting a finger to stop it. The private conversation later. That evening, as guests began trickling out, Jake approached me outside. He stood by the hedges, hands in his pockets, breathing hard. "You win," he said quietly. I looked at him. "This isn't a game." He ran a hand through his hair. "You sent that crap to my office. My boss asked if I forged the proposal. My uncle asked about the money. Madison's losing it. And if this wedding crashes tomorrow, it's on you." I raised an eyebrow. "You think I'm the reason your lies are collapsing?" His jaw clenched. I took a step closer, calm and cold. "You used my money, lied to me. Let Madison believe she was entitled to what wasn't hers. And now that people are starting to ask questions, you're the victim?" "You're bitter," he said, "because no one ever picked you." That one cut deep. For a second. Then I exhaled. "No, Jake, I'm dangerous, because I stopped waiting to be picked." He stared, stunned. "I'm not ruining your wedding," I added. "You two did that the moment you built it on someone else's back." Then I walked away. Back at the hotel, in my room, I laid out the final items on the bed. The USB drive. The signed affidavit from the attorney. The jeweler's original transaction slip. And a wedding card I had bought months ago when I still believed I'd be celebrating something. I tucked it all into one final envelope. Tomorrow, that envelope would be opened. Not by accident, not anonymously, but deliberately, publicly, and by someone who mattered most. The morning of the wedding arrived like a painting, too perfect to be real. The vineyard shimmered with golden light. Rows of white chairs stretched across the lawn. A string quartet rehearsed softly near the fountain. Guests mingled in pastel linen, sipping champagne, whispering beneath sunglasses. But the air was already heavy, not with joy, with waiting. Something was coming. I arrived 15 minutes before the ceremony, not in bridesmaid attire, but in a clean black dress. Simple. Quiet. A visual rebellion against the pastels Madison demanded. Her friends saw me and froze. One mouthed, "Are you really doing this?" I said nothing. Instead, I walked calmly to the coordinator's table and handed her the envelope. "This is for the father of the bride," I said. "Please make sure he reads it before the ceremony starts." She blinked. "Do you want me to Just make sure he reads it. Then I turned, walked to the last row of chairs, and sat alone. 15 minutes before the vows. From a distance, I watched my father open the envelope just behind the archway. I watched the color drain from his face as he scanned the documents, the trust breakdown, the wire transfers, the jeweler's confirmation, the USB ad. I saw him read the letter I'd written last. You asked me why I would do this to her. I ask you why you did this to me. You knew what that money meant. You gave it away like I was disposable. Now you'll answer for it, not in anger but in truth. Because I won't carry your secrets anymore. He didn't move for a long time. Then he slowly folded the papers and walked toward the bride's suite. The delay. The ceremony didn't start on time. Guests grew restless. Whispers thickened. The string quartet stopped playing. Jake came out once, then disappeared again, his face tight and pale. Then the coordinator stepped forward and quietly said the phrase no one wanted to hear. There's been a delay. We appreciate your patience. My phone buzzed, a text from Tessa. She knows. She's screaming. The dad confessed. The wedding is falling apart. And then, she asked if you were behind it. I told her you didn't crash her wedding. You just finally stopped letting her use your name as a stepping stone. The walk away, I stood up from the back row. I didn't wait for a scene. I didn't need screaming or sobbing or chaos. Let them have their unraveling. Let them sort through the ashes of a wedding built on theft. As I walked back through the vineyard, a few guests stared. One older woman gave me a knowing nod. Another, Jake's cousin I think, raised a glass like a quiet salute. I didn't smile, but inside, something unclenched. Not joy. Not revenge. Freedom. A week later. Madison never posted the wedding photos, because there weren't any. The wedding was officially called off 3 days later. Postponed indefinitely was the phrase she used on social media. Jake disappeared from her feed. And me? I met with a probate lawyer. We began proceedings to reclaim what was left of my grandfather's trust and pursue civil damages for what had been spent without my consent. I mailed my parents one letter. No apology, no emotion. Just, you can't take from someone forever and expect them to stay quiet. They didn't reply. That was fine. Some people deserve silence more than closure. 6 months later, I took a trip I'd always dreamed of, Greece. The Aegean air tasted like salt and possibility. I watched the sun melt into the sea and thought, for once, only of myself. Not of the betrayal, not of the wedding that never was. Just the girl who finally stopped shrinking to make others comfortable. Ending. Note never wore the bracelet Madison gave me, but I did keep it. A reminder. Not of her, but of the day I stopped apologizing for standing alone. Because sometimes, the most beautiful revenge isn't chaos. It's becoming untouchable.